Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour in 2020. We're now in the Armageddon game between Magnus Carlsen and Ding Liren, and the result after 6 rounds was equal. A great match game it was so far between Magnus and Ding, and now in this Armageddon again the London system was played, and I've analyzed so far London system game played by Magnus with the white pieces against Ding, so you can check it out. It was my previous video. And in that particular game, Ding played this a little bit sort of Queen's Gambit declined, maybe a sort of Nimzo Indian setup. Here he played the King's Indian, and I'm a King's Indian player. For me, it was a perfect game because I have also my troubles to face the London, this very annoying setup. But Ding Liren will show really what inaccuracies someone can make in the London, and I took my time to analyze these games. I think it's really an instructive chess game, and if you want to beat the London, and if you want to have a great counterplay against this very static and positional setup of white, this example by Ding Liren is a great one. How to proceed here, it was really a great attacking performance. So let's check out now this London system versus the King's Indian. We're now in the round 7. So fight. We have d4 played by Magnus, knight to f6, and now knight to f3, g6. As I said, I'm a King's Indian player. I would love to show you this game from this perspective, but okay, we'll leave it like this because I wanted to show you the inaccuracies that you really can make as white, which Magnus played really a couple of inaccuracies. Here bishop to f4, we have bishop to g7, and now e3. So we have now the London versus the King's Indian in the game. Ding Liren castles. So what a great thing by Ding Liren is that he doesn't play the move d6 immediately. That's a delaying move. Here by Ding, he plays castling. In my deep analysis of the King's Indian, let's flip the board. I want to show you this game from Black's perspective. I'm sorry, but okay, let's really watch this game from Black's perspective. Because if you play this d6 move, then white could go into a very aggressive line with the move c4. But if we castle first, then if white tries maybe the move c4, then we could go into sort of a greenfield setup and play the move d5 and c5. So this castling idea, because we're not challenging the center immediately after the move e3 and castling, we're not challenging immediately here by white. So as I said, we're waiting what is white going to do, and here after the move bishop to e2, now d6 is a possibility because white hasn't played the c4 move immediately. So we could play something like knight to c6, and e5 is also sometimes a great counterattack possibility. So in the game h3 was played. I wanted to show you what happens if you don't play the move h3. So if you play the normal maybe London system setup here with the move c3, then you get knight to h5. We're chasing the bishop a little bit all over the board because what we want to do is keep the bishop here on the board. So h6, bishop to h4, now g5. And one of the best ways here for white to proceed is to move knight to d2, counterattacking. And what most of us would probably do is simply to retreat with the knight to f6. But I want you really to memorize this line. I think that g takes h4 is a possibility, even if this happens, bishop to h5. But now we crack simply the position for our dark square bishop. The dark square bishop is now our main strength. In the game, h3 is a forced move by white because if white castles, then h3 is sort of a positional idea. We want to split pawns in front of the king. So in most of the times you see that white will try maybe some g3 moves, but we can simply proceed with f5 because the bishop pair allows us to create really an open position. So after the potential h3 move here, we can simply crack the position, as I said, on dark square. E takes d4, and now c5, again simply breaking the position for our bishop. After knight to c3, you see it's a bad position we can simply take. So black, white would be forced maybe to play something like knight to b3. But as I said, I hope you realize that our king, although we have here a weird position, double pawn structure, the black's king is not endangered here. So let's see now the continuation. d6, h3 was played. So the correct move by Magnus. But now comes a problem after the move c5. Here, if you take d takes c5, then queen to a5 could happen, or we could play even a more aggressive way here. After d takes c5, we could go knight to e4. It's also a tricky move, opening the diagonal for a dark square bishop, challenging the pawn on c5. Then we could follow with knight to c6, really the normal healthy developing move. So here Magnus, after the move c5, plays, I think it's really an inaccuracy. He plays the move knight to d2. A better idea is to play this idea, this compact idea on c3, because there is now one problem. After knight to d2, the problem is that you have cut off your connection between the queen and the pawn. So here Ding takes, c takes d4, and you have to take with the pawn. If knight takes d4 happens, then we have e5, the fork on the bishop and the knight. So after the move c takes d4, e takes d4, and now Ding challenges the pawn. So the problem is, as I said, d5 isn't a possibility because the queen is not connected to the pawn. So now Magnus plays the move c3, but it comes a little bit too late because e5. This is a great move by Ding. He sacrifices the pawn for the initiative. After d takes e5, we have d takes e5. And if you take, I've analyzed this line, of course, what happens if you play knight takes e5, then you get knight to d5, chasing the bishop. Knight to c6 is the best line for white. After b takes c6, we have bishop to g3, but now rook to e8. We're forcing now the king to castle. After castling, now comes a stunner, bishop takes c3. If you take b takes c3, then knight takes c3 and knight to e2 will happen. Then we simply take out the bishop, and this is a perfect game. We having an extra pawn, and it's playable here for black. So what you could do after the move bishop to c3, after the sacrifice, queen to c1, then rook to e8, e2, pardon me, and b takes c3 is of course the forced line. But now we have knight to e3, a very nice attack on the rook, and after f takes e3, here is really a great simplification line in which I think black can make a draw. And of course, from black's perspective, and Ding played this Armageddon game, it's a perfect position. We still have opportunities to play bishop to e6, attacking this weak pawn. There are now many pawn islands which we can also attack. Of course, we have some dark square problems here. There are several tactical threats, of course, if the bishop comes to e5, and we could have some backtrack problems with some checkmate threats. But as I said, this is playable. After the move d takes e5, you see Magnus didn't take the pawn. Probably he knew about this tactical line that Ding has prepared here, and bishop to g5, played by Magnus, and now h6, simply kicking away the bishop. Bishop takes f6, and now queen to f6. What Ding has accomplished here is a perfect position for the bishop. So the great thing about this setup now is that we have now 4 versus 3 pawn majority, so we can create dynamics. So what we want to do is escape somewhere with our queen, play f5, e4, bishop to e6, normal setups, rook to d8, getting both of these rooks on the d and e file. So it's really now easy for black to find the best next move. So here Magnus plays castling, rook to d8, preventing some knight to e4 ideas by Magnus, queen to b3, and now queen to e7, with preparations finally to play the move f5. Of course, it has to be prepared with king to h7, but if we manage to get this f5 roll, then it's of course great game. Bishop to e6 is also a possibility. If you cover with the bishop, then knight to a5 is sort of a tactical threat. So in the game, rook to d1, we have e4, great move by Ding. Knight to h2, you see Magnus is getting kicked away by this pawn on e4, and now e3, simply opening, splitting the position for the bishops. After knight to f3, we have e takes f2, rook to f2, and now bishop to e6. Now comes this dangerous attacks. As I said, you cannot cover. Bishop to c4 is not a possibility, as you get knight to a5. So that's why Magnus has to retreat. And I've never seen, at least not for a while, that Magnus is kicked so away by this attack, by this great attack that Ding has played here. Queen to a4, h6, also a very natural move. b5. You see how it's easy for Ding to find the best next move. Really simply attacking possibilities, a simple threat sort of. Magnus Carlsen is always challenged. He cannot regroup. He cannot activate his pieces. You see how weird the setup is. He cannot double rooks on the d file, so here he tried rook to e1, but now b5 by Ding. We have queen to f4, but now queen to c5. Very important move to really create a spin on the rook and also on the king. So now the position of Magnus Carlsen is really paralyzed. In the game he tried a3, but now knight to e5. Here Ding tries to simplify the position, knight to f3, knight takes f3, and now rook to a7. Very nice move with preparations to play rook to d7, and now we can simply double up rooks and create also some dangerous threats. So in the game knight to d2, we have knight to rook to d7, knight to e4, attacking the queen, but Ding stays of course with the queen on this very nice diagonal. Knight to f6, bishop to f6, queen to f6, and now rook to d2, simply using the spin further. In the game queen to f4, and now rook takes b2. This is now from this endgame's perspective, it's of course a great endgame here for black. It's winning if you play this endgame correctly. So what the problem is that you cannot play this rook sacrifice because the queen is covering that square. I'm sure that Magnus was thinking about some tactical threats with rook takes e6 followed with queen to f7, but so far it's not possible because the queen is on the best square on the board, controls diagonals, controls files. Great performance so far by Ding. So rook to e3, played by rook takes f2, queen to f2, and now king to g7, improving the position on dark squares because there are always maybe some perpetuals. What Magnus would love to do is maybe to create a dangerous check on e5. So here Magnus tried rook to e1, but now rook to d1, simply deflecting the queen from the defense of the rook. Here rook takes e3 was played, king to h2, and now Liren takes another pawn. He has two extra pawns. It's simply winning endgame here. So queen to d6. Here Ding plays bishop to c4. Again, a simplification line, really releasing the pressure. But what he has gained here is now a pass pawn. In the game, Magnus tried queen to a6, but now Ding played queen to e5. After king to g1, queen to u1, and Ding played on a perpetual and made a draw. I'm sure that Ding knows that this is winning, but he played simply on a draw. He wanted to win this Armageddon game, which is of course not a bad idea. You don't want to complicate things when you don't need to. It's a draw. I have a point against Magnus Carlsen, which is a great thing. But here I wanted to show you what's the winning line after the move queen to e5 and king to g1. We have here queen to c5. That's the winning sequence. Here after king to h2, we simply push the pawn because the pawn is supported by the queen. And now the main idea is to play simply here c2. The queen has to cover, but now we play another check. You have to cover. If you go with your king on the first rank, then queen to d1 is simply winning. So g3 is a forced move, but again, this idea queen to d1, and the problem is you cannot do perpetuals. Even if you try something like queen to b7 in order to do some perpetuals, first you get to check, and here c1 to promotion, and it's game over. So great game by Ding, but believe me or not, how chess can be brutal sometimes. After this move, you see you have the choice c3 or you after the move, pardon me, here c5, you have the choice c3 or knight to d2. So as I said, here Magnus played knight to d2 and allows now really Ding this breakthrough motif. Great attacking performance, sacrificing simply pawn. Magnus didn't want to go into this particular line, and now h6 after queen to f6. Here it's a perfect position for the bishops. It was really an instructive chess game for me. I wanted to see how to break the London because I have troubles also to play against this opening. It's really an annoying one, and Ding Liren crushed it. He had, as I said, the winning endgame. At the end, he made a draw, a perpetual, which is of course perfectly fine. Wins now the first match game, so 4 more to go. So Magnus needs to do something in order to win against Ding Liren. Ding Liren wasn't playing very well in the last tournament of the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour, but now he is in the lead, and I'm not sure he played great. I don't think that it's an unfair result. He played great games. He had also some drawish games where he lost the game, so it's a fair result of the day one, because now Ding has every right to be confident and can really maybe kick out the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this London system slash King's Indian sort of. It was a tutorial here by Ding Liren. If you want to know more about the King's Indian, I've created more than 45 videos of this very nice opening. You can check out also the series. Here's the link. And if you want to see more chess games of this tournament, here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best of